Good afternoon. My name is Paul Charnier. I'm the editorial page editor at the Day newspaper. Having to do with an issue that has certainly a lot of interest here in Connecticut, been generating a lot of discussion, and that is the fact, despite having some of the highest taxes in the country, and despite a significant reduction in the state workforce over the last several years, Connecticut continues to go from one fiscal crisis to the next, creating uncertainty which economists agree is a drag on the economy. So if elected, what ideas would you bring to Hartford to try to restore fiscal stability to the state of Connecticut? And we'll begin with Beth Hogan.
Okay. First, thank you to the Day for having both Holly and I here today. Really appreciate this opportunity. Yes, we have a budget crisis. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to continue to grow and balloon. I know that coming up this year, we're looking at a $1.3, $1.4 million deficit before either one of us gets there. We need to bring structural changes to fix the budget. We need to do pension reform, and we need to work on the local property tax burden that's on our communities. That's probably one of the driving forces of making people migrate out of Connecticut. And that hasn't been looked at for several years. I'm appreciative of the fact that CCM is doing a round study or making legislative recommendations to the community. I think that's something that instead of talking about it for 30 or 40 years, we need to actually do something. We've been kicking the can down the road too long. It's not a question of one party, pointer finger. It's a joint effort. We need to work together. And here's some of the things that I would do. First, I believe in that setting aside the 15% net revenue income in the rainy day fund. I believe that we need to change the way we forecast budgets to be more realistic to begin with. I don't believe in a 1 to 2 year cycle. I believe we need to look at a 5-year cycle in order to get realistic numbers. I believe that the rainy day fund should only be used when it should be used. I do believe that we need to look for further efficiencies in our programming, and do the results-based accountability. We need to look at the $7 billion of tax relief that we give out each year to people here in Connecticut and groups and find out what is our return on investment on that $7 billion. That's lost revenue that we need desperately. Maybe some of it makes sense. Maybe some of it doesn't, but we should go through it with a fine-tooth comb and look at each one to make sure that it really is what it's supposed to do. In terms of pension reform, I love to do what Rhode Island did, but it won't work in this state. We can't go retroactive because of the contract clause. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss. The idea that Rhode Island did was great, but it was a statutory amendment. If you're doing a statutory amendment, that is quite easy. But when you have to negotiate a contract between two parties, that is much more difficult. So we could not get that retroactivity. If we could, we would solve all our problems. So going forward, we need to look at how we calculate the pension. I believe that we could either do it like Social Security and look at the long earning history of each individual employee, maybe make some exceptions for police and fire that do hazardous duty. I believe we need to have a cap on it. I believe that we need to have more contributions in terms of medical costs, dental costs. We need to align what the pension is today more with the private market, because the salaries seem pretty much in line to what the private market is and has been for several years now. I know that the original understanding was it was out of whack between state and private, but that's no longer the case, and we need to bring that alignment in. And I am willing to work with my Republicans, my Democrats, anyone that wants to get these common sense solutions, because there will be no tomorrow. I'm not interested in raising taxes. I'm interested in growing the economy and bringing jobs here to southeastern Connecticut, jobs with sustainable wages, and really get this part of the region that is often ignored up in Hartford going.
All right, let's move the discussion on. Holly Cheeseman, your chance to respond. What ideas you would bring to Hartford to address these ongoing fiscal crises?
Thank you. Well, obviously, I share the concern of both the editorial board and my opponent. We are in a fiscal crisis. Many of the ideas that she suggested I would support. I think we need more certainty in projecting revenue. I also think we need to look at how we're investing our pension funds. The latest return on our 15 pension funds was 0.35%. That's about 40% less than comparable pension funds made throughout the rest of the country. We need to look at how we burden businesses and municipalities. Excess regulations have a cost, and by adding additional regulations and mandates, we stifle businesses. For example, the proposal for individual retirement accounts. It's a wonderful idea, but even I, running a small business, looked at it and said, how is this going to impact my bottom line? A large company can easily withstand additional regulations. They have whole HR departments and legal departments. But if you're a small business employing 5 people, now that's additional bookkeeper costs. I remember in the governor's original budget cycle, when all of a sudden taxes were added to services that hadn't had them before. The number of times I went into my dog groomer, the local bakery, and they said, oh my, now this is yet another level. So I think if we want to grow business, if we want to create those additional jobs, we have to look at the regulatory burden. Other states have done it. John Kasich, whom I know many people supported for president, took Ohio from a state that was 48th in job creation to number 10. How? By looking at that regulatory burden, by cutting taxes. It may seem counterintuitive. By actually cutting taxes, having a flatter tax rate, you ensure that more money's coming in. What do we gain by having retired people, even hedge fund billionaires, leaving the state? One billionaire left New Jersey, and they had to call the legislature back into special session because it left a $223 billion hole. We need certainty. So again, I think looking at a longer-term vision for budgets, not just the 2 years, a 5 or 10-year cycle, working with municipalities for property tax reform, but really not continuing to go down the path we have been on, which is reeling from crisis to crisis, coming up with ideas that don't work, that just continue to drive businesses and people out of the state. I would want to work with everybody who wants to find a solution.
Just to follow up before we move to the next question, give you both the chance. Ms. Hogan, and I didn't hear, this is for both of you, I didn't hear anything about tax increases. That's the other side of a budget problem, is revenues and expenses. Would either of you consider tax increases? And also, you could react to what Mrs. Cheeseman said about too much regulation in Connecticut, too much licensing, too much bureaucracy, and there could be savings in that regard. So on those two issues, if
and the first issue was the
taxes. Would
the
you
taxes.
know? Do they have to be on the table to get to?
I think the way that you grow revenue is through economic growth. That will raise your revenue, not raising taxes. I don't think whether you're what income percentage you are, that's the answer going forward. They've done it. They did it, 2 years ago? It didn't do anything. Obviously, that's not the answer. It's growing jobs. It's growing the economy. It's making it work here in Connecticut. In terms of regulations, yes, we should review the regulations. What doesn't work, what doesn't make sense, what was a lobbyist put in there for another reason should be looked at and taken out. But there will be some regulations because that's the form of government because of public health, health and welfare, and that's just something that is. But there's a lot of it that we can certainly simplify and make it easier, one-stop shopping, getting things done in a different way, restructuring it. But a review of the regulations, and I think that it's been said that regulations have been reviewed. I don't know who did them or how it's done, but it really needs to be looked at. But you're not going to throw all regulations out the door because that's just the society that we live in. But certainly where there's waste and where it doesn't make sense, it should go.
And just for the record, Mrs. Cheeseman, on taxes,
Sure.
and whether that, are you open to that being part of the formula?
When I ran in 2010, I remember taking that question from Ray Hackett, and I said, no, I am not going to unilaterally rule out tax increases forever. On the other hand, any new tax increase or increase in drive to get revenue has to have a sunset. Revenue is like crack cocaine to politicians. Once they have it, it's never enough. And I speak as a politician. I hope I'm different. But you cannot constantly have the tap open without going back and saying, do we need this money? Is this money actually going where it's supposed to? Look at the taxes that you know, it's a three-shell Monte game in Connecticut. It's the money comes here, and then we take it from transportation to the general fund and back and forth. That sort of, you know, fly-by-night accounting has to stop. And as far as regulations are concerned, I would have a mandatorium on all new mandates and regulations. I was at a zoning meeting last week, small text amendment, to eliminate the need when you applied for an outdoor dining permit a second time if you served alcohol. You have to put the big sign up. They said if it's a renewal, you don't have to put it. That had to go to the Department of Environment and Energy and Environmental Protection because it falls in the Long Island Sound Protection Zone. Excuse me? You know, that's the kind of craziness. What, if you throw the sign in Long Island Sound, maybe I can understand. But there are so many regulations that on the surface seem well advised that actually discourage business and harm municipalities.
All right, thank you. Our next question will be from Kimberly Drellick, our day staff writer, and it goes to Mrs. Cheeseman.
Okay. A memorandum of understanding was signed last year to try to find another property in exchange for Landmark Development's land in the Oswegatchie Hills in East Lyme. If elected, what do you see as your role in that?
I would certainly work with both the First Selectman in East Lyme and the interested parties and State Senator Paul Formica to move this along. I think coming up with a way that does not rely on non-existent or hard-to-find tax dollars is the way to go. I know they've looked at brownfield properties in Connecticut and throughout the country. I would certainly do everything in my power to bring this about. Having both my opponent and I were lucky to be at the Save the River, Save the Hills kayak regatta. There were hundreds of people there. That is a beautiful, unspoiled piece of property. And to see it developed would be a tragedy. People often cite McCook Point as, thank God the taxpayers in East Lyme had the vision to preserve this. I hope in 5 or 10 years people will say, thank heavens the people involved in East Lyme and Waterford pursued this and have preserved this wonderful space with such an important environmental impact on the Sound, on Niantic Bay. And as I say, whatever was necessary, I would cooperate and hope to move that along.
Thank you. Ms. Hogan.
Well, I agree. I mean, it's very important. It has been important for many, many years. Regardless of who's in office, it will remain a top priority in getting it done. I know that the land swap idea is a pretty creative way of doing it. From what I understand, there hasn't been much success yet, but there has been properties being looked at. I think what's difficult in this whole negotiation is where the money is going to come from. We're probably going to get some money from the East Lyme Public Land Trust. We'll probably get some money. Maybe if we had a bonding instrument. I doubt if it's still viable or alive, or it may be. It's going to be a little difficult, and it's getting to what the heck the price is. Price, is a subjective measure. How important is it? It's very important to the people of East Lyme and Waterford and the community. So I think. And getting the developer to get there. It can be done. It will be done. It's been a bipartisan effort for many, many years and will continue to be so. Whoever's in power, I think everyone will have the full support of getting it done.
All right, thank you. Next question is from our Deputy Managing Editor, and it will go to Beth Hogan.
Hi.
Okay. I recently purchased a home from an older couple who decided they could no longer afford to live in Connecticut. So they were moving to Tennessee to meet their daughter, who is in her late 20s, and also moved down south because it was too expensive. What do you tell people who are leaving Connecticut because it's too expensive to live here, and how do you fix it?
Well, we want all generations to stay. We want the young, we want the old, because your community isn't going to thrive if you don't have a multi-generational diversity to it. For the young people, how to get them to stay. There was an initiative, school, learn here, live here. I think that needs to come back, and a way to engage young people in wanting to stay so we can stop the brain drain, to stay here in exchange for working here and going to school here, that they would receive some type of tax incentive. But the tax incentive earmark could only be for, let's say, a limited purpose. It would be to buy a new home, to start a homeowners program for young people and young families to stay here, learn, and work here. For the older generation, we need them. We need their wisdom and their leadership. We have to do something for property tax, because that's a tax that doesn't discriminate against anybody. You could have not a penny in your pocket, but you paid off your mortgage, you worked hard all your life, and all you see each year is the mill rate going up for services. That would make anybody run, okay? And that's out walking and talking the doors. The number one issue that comes up is property taxes, local property taxes, and we've talked about it for so long. I remember John DeStefano and whoever was the leadership then of the Blue Ribbon Commission that we're going to do something. And there seems to be an appetite again. And I guess if there is a silver lining with this crisis that we have, is that we actually will do something. And then I think you'll have the older population staying, their children staying in state, them able to be grandparents and mentors in the community. But local property tax relief has to start. New and innovative startups, supporting our young people, making a way for them to stay in a very, very expensive state that no one really can afford.
Mrs. Cheeseman, your thoughts on what we're seeing with the flight of both young professionals and our older citizens as they reach retirement?
Well, I think, as we discussed, Connecticut does too many things to discourage people from staying here. And I think we have to look at all options. At the Children's Museum, we were fortunate to benefit from a program called Serve Here, which was largely started with private philanthropy with some state funding that gives a non-for-profit or municipal authority $10,000 if they create a new full-time job or turn a part-time job into a full-time one. You have to offer it to a Connecticut resident between the ages of 18 and 29. And once they've worked for you for a year, they in return get $10,000 that they can apply towards student loan debt or for additional education. And we were in the entry class, employed a young woman named Virginia Steiner, who is still here. It was a new full-time job. So I would welcome that sort of public-private partnership for our young people. But we have to look at keeping everyone here. So, yes, property taxes are an issue, but so is the way we tax other income, pension income, retirement income, Social Security. I actually read the panel report from the last group that looked at taxes and saw, rather than decreasing the tax burden on our retired community, looked at adding taxes on military pensions, Social Security. We're not going to keep people here by taking more money out of their pocket. We're going to keep people here by making things affordable, by coming up with ways, as we've both discussed, to grow the economy, so we're not relying on taxes to balance the budget. And only by being business friendly and encouraging the private enterprise can we have the kind of revenue we need to allow us to keep everybody here.
Just to follow up to Ms. Hogan, the Democrats for the last several years now have controlled all avenues of government, the state Senate, the state House, the governor's position. So it would seem the policies are not playing well with those who decide that their fortunes are better moving somewhere else where it's more affordable. So don't the Democrats sort of own this issue, and what shift in policies would you urge your fellow Democrats to take if you were fortunate enough to get elected?
I think both parties own the issue, and I do think some of the Democratic policies were not smart and well thought out in terms of, I think they were looking at crisis to crisis. I think Republicans felt that they were on the sideline, that should have been invited in past budget sessions. I would never leave anybody out, whether they were the minority or another party, in order to get the best ideas. But also, I think they have a stronger role to play, too, regardless whether or not they're at the table, in getting out what they would want to see happen. It was very hard, I'm sure, and I'm not here to judge for the people up there that had to make the cuts. And I also do work at a nonprofit, and we lost 100 jobs, and we understand. We're doing what we need to do, and I'm also a small business person. We take it on the chin, but we need to work together. And I think if that wasn't happening, it should happen. And we all own this problem. We can finger point and we can say, well, because it was a Democratic governor, it's a Democratic legislator, and that's true. Did they deserve blame? Yes, but we all need to collectively solve the problem, and I don't think either party escapes from it. If there were really good ideas, we need to get them done. There's too much posturing. It's too partisan up there. The Republicans have, one-party rule, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. The Democrats, some of them are looking to raise income taxes on Fairfield County. It's disconnected from reality. I just want people to say, this is the problem. We all acknowledge it's a problem. How are we going to fix it? Put whatever political capital aside. It doesn't mean anything. If we really want to do something great for Connecticut, we need to do it. We need to do it now. We need to roll up our sleeves and work. So whoever wants to blame, they can go like this all day. To me, I'm starting, if I get in, and I'm a Democrat, and I'm proud to be a Democrat, I'm not but I will do what's right for the people of Salem and East Lyme and this region, because this region will prosper when we're all working together.
All right, thank you. Where's blame affects? Give you a chance.
Well,
to react to that.
I agree. Past Republican administrations with what I would term sweetheart deals to unions going back as far as John Rowland and even Jody Rell. On the other hand, when you have the governor of the state of Connecticut telling his legislature with regard to the non-union Yukon contract, this cannot be approved. When you have a legislature that consistently fails to vote on union contracts, knowing that within 30 days, by not taking a vote, they are approved, I think that's a problem. And given who's been in control of the legislature, I think that's a Democrat problem. And as I say, getting back to funny accounting, you had a governor who, when he was first elected, said, I have solved the fiscal problem. We are going to be fine. He included $100 million in savings from a suggestion box. Come on, guys. And my understanding is none of that has appeared. There was supposed to be $100 million plus from a high-quality employee health plan. Employees would have to pay an extra $100 unless they agreed to have preventive care, monitoring of chronic conditions. That was going to save the state or make the state a couple of $100 million. Well, surprise, surprise, 99% of the employees said, I'm not paying the extra $100. I'll go get my checkup. I'll go get my blood sugar tested. There are too many shell games going on, and we have to stop that. And I think, yes, the Republicans did come up with ideas. They wanted to reopen the employee contracts and really seriously take a look at those post-employee benefits. They wanted to even look at things like the Citizens Election Program. Why should people like Beth and me, if we are lucky enough to be elected and have no opponent next time, get a grant to run a campaign? That's just crazy. So I think there are plenty of places we could find common ground, but there's also no denying that at the moment we have a governor who appears to take the situation seriously and is willing to make the hard choices, and a Democrat legislature that is basically saying, no, let's just tax some more. And that's why I think it's important to increase the number of Republicans in Hartford so there are more people with a seat at the table with good answers.
All right, thank you. The next question goes to Holly Cheeseman. And actually, I'd like to get your both reaction to this. In a normal election season, we'd all assume that both of you would be supporting your nominee for president. This has not been a usual year. Both candidates for president of the major parties have plenty of controversy and record high negative ratings for both candidates. So wanted to ask both of you, starting with Mrs. Cheeseman, who will you be voting for president, and why?
I knew I was going to get this question. And I will start by saying, gee, I thought we had a secret ballot. Anyway, I will be open. Donald Trump was not my candidate. I supported Scott Walker, and I'm very disappointed that he wasn't the candidate because I think he could have brought some excellent qualities to the presidency. On the other hand, I could not vote for Hillary Clinton. As my beloved late husband used to say, who was English, I thought you fought a revolution to get away from a hereditary aristocracy. I think the issues that have been raised are worth talking about. I think all of us want an America that is safe. I think all of us want an America that has full employment, where anyone, no matter what their race, what their color, has children who can go out safe and not be hurt going to school. So I'm going to vote the Republican ticket.
All right. Beth Hogan, how will you be voting and why?
I won't be voting for Trump. I will be voting for Hillary Clinton. I'm not happy in the sense, this is my problem with Hillary Clinton. I do believe she's qualified, a lot more qualified than Trump, and Trump scares me. The thing that I don't like, I hate politicians that walk the ethical fine line on things. It probably gets me peeved off. I don't believe she's a criminal like a lot of people do, or people have viewpoints. But I do believe that she walks a fine line sometimes, and I think it's a sense of entitlement that it just doesn't sit well with me. But in terms of qualification and her positions on the issues, I do support her.
All right.
And I will be voting for her.
All right, thank you. So we're going to probably move back to some local issues, and Kimberly Drellick, I think, has the next question, and it's for Beth Hogan.
Okay. Some in East Lyme have recently said that the town needs to take more precautions in protecting its aquifer, particularly as it considers allowing a gas station to be part of the Costco development at Gateway, while others have said the plan would meet state regulations. What are your thoughts on this, and do you think that the state regulations should be more stringent?
Well, it's a very interesting issue, and I think there is a concern out there, and I think that was generated too with the Day article. I do bump into that issue in the north end of town about the aquifer. My concern is, and what I understand in terms of Costco, is that right now it has met certain approvals on technical amendments, but the site plan itself has not come in front of zoning. So I guess there is an opportunity for people to weigh in. I understand that Costco's business model requires a lot of gas stations, and I think that people are finding out about that or are in tune to it now. I'm not saying, because people are hardworking. They're not like looking all the time at, the issues in their backyard until it becomes a pressing issue. What I don't understand in terms of this, I know that there was an amendment of the aquifer, and it's under the jurisdiction of zoning. We have grandfathered in a lot of the gas stations. They concern me just as much as this one. It's unfortunate that we were ever on the aquifer. I would hope, and maybe, that Costco could try a different business model, but I know it's cookie cutter, and not have those gas stations there. But I'm sure that's not going to be the prevailing argument of the day. I think they need to be super stringent, and I think we need to look at, with all this technology and all this advancement in green energy, we need to go back to all the gas stations that are on the aquifer and find out a way that we can shore them up. All we need is one accident, and there goes your drinking water. I know that we have 95 going on above us, but we should also be thinking about, when we're planning to do the 95, all the green, all the super smart technology to prevent a spill. Because when we have a spill, that's it. And you're poisoning the water for generations. You're hurting the population. So we want to do no harm. So anything that we can do, and anything that I can do when I'm up there, I will do everything I can to prevent that, because drinking water is our life. And another thing, I know that there's a bill up there that's coming up. It's pretty strong about selling our water, municipalities selling water to third-party providers so that they can sell it on the open market. I'm against that. I think we need to protect our resources and asset for the people that live here.
So just to clarify your answer, and then we'll certainly give Mrs. Cheeseman a chance on that question. So would you or wouldn't you, as a legislature, propose legislation that would prohibit a gas station such as this on an aquifer? Because my understanding is now it is on an aquifer. It is allowed because it's not in sort of the catch basement to the wellhead.
Right.
And some say it should be tougher. They shouldn't be allowed to build this gas station. I just want to clarify,
I don't
yes
think
or
you,
no?
Okay, yes, I would go for stringent aquifer protection. Would it stop Costco? Probably not. But yes, I would. I would do everything I can to tighten it up and find a way to go back and fix and look at. I'm not talking about removing gas tanks, but shoring up and protecting our aquifer more for the existing commercial gas stations that are in the area.
Right. Thank you. Mrs. Cheeseman, your response to the question.
I understand the concern over the safety of the aquifer, but as the Day editorial pointed out, we have much better technology to pick up this kind of spill. In addition, East Lyme's actual land that's free for commercial development is less than 4%. So Costco is going to come in. It's a done deal. Do we need to keep the aquifer safe? Absolutely. Would I propose legislation that would prohibit gas stations anywhere on any aquifer? No, because I don't believe you make a blanket rule. I think you have to look at the best technology and individual towns and let the people in those towns, the local elected officials, do what they think is in the best interest of their town. And I don't think there are any elected officials who want to put their community's drinking water at risk.
All right. Thank you. Before we move to the next question from our deputy managing editor, we had a question came in from people watching online, and I think Mrs. Cheeseman, you get the first crack at this, and they're questioning what can you really get done. They question what could you really get done as a first-year representative in such a large legislative body. And both of you, it's an open seat, so both of you would be first-year representatives. So talk about the experience and why you think or why you don't think you'd be able to get things done. We'll start with Mrs. Cheeseman.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm up there to be a voice for the voters of East Lyme and Salem, who get up every day, go to work, send their kids to school, or go to the stores. So I would hope from that point of view, I could actually make a difference as a junior legislator. I realize I'm going to be bottom of the heap as regards committee assignments and that sort of thing. But I also, and maybe this is my somewhat naive belief in the democratic process, believe that good ideas will rise to the top, and that the party there, my party, and should the Republicans be lucky enough to capture a majority in either the House or the Senate, which is by no means impossible, would allow me to work with them to put together the kinds of policies and ideas that are going to benefit our communities in particular and the state in general. I have a couple of ideas. I was thrilled this summer to see that the governor signed one of them into effect, which was to have Connecticut have a right to try law, so terminal patients can use those FDA drugs that are in trials as a last resort if there are no other drugs available for their conditions. And I'm delighted. Now we just need the federal government to make that possible. I would love to see the state of Connecticut do what Texas has done with regard to college affordability. Any high school student in Texas can go to myfuturetx.com, put in their location, their family's income, their proposed major, and where they want to go to school, and they can see how much it's going to cost them both to go to school and how much they will make in 1, 3, 5, 8, and 10 years. How wonderful for the students in Connecticut to have that at their disposal. And it's an independent company, College Measures, that puts that together. We have to help our young people stay here, but we also have to help them understand, if I want to go to college as an anthropology major, how much is it going to cost me? And if I stay in Connecticut, how much am I going to make after 10 years? I think it's those incremental good ideas that I could propose. And as I say, I know I'm not going to get committee chairmanships if we were lucky enough to capture the legislature, but I hope I could bring good ideas and at the end of the day be a responsible, valued voice for the voters of East Lyme and Salem.
Ms. Hogan.
Innovations have been going on for 3 or 4 years but they need to be looked at and said, how do we do things differently? How do we coordinate differently, and how do we coordinate in delivering services to the people? But when I wake up every day, I'll work for East Lyman Salem, for the people in East Lyman Salem that I know that struggle to pay bills, that I know that it's very hard to work and not have much to show for it. And I will represent everybody, and I will look at every single way in which to grow this economy, and I will not vote for the sake of voting for party. I have a history of doing what I think is right, and I will do it. And I'm not there to build a long-term career or feel that, well, this will be good for me to be on a committee someday because I did X, Y, and Z for Joe Smo. No, it doesn't work with Hogan. Maybe that's my problem, but I will get the job done.
All right, thank both of you. Our next question, and it goes to Beth Hogan.
In the second quarter of 2016, more people died of fentanyl-related overdoses than heroin-related ones. This was just announced last Friday by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. The state has taken some measures to address the opioid epidemic, and yet we are constantly hearing from families that there aren't enough detox beds available or that treatment is too costly. What do you see as the state's responsibility in addressing this issue?
Well, this goes to public health and welfare. I consider it a public health crisis. It's hit our community very hard. No, there's not enough treatment beds. No, there's not enough outreach. No, there's not enough Narcan that's available. Should be available to everybody that wants it. And yes, we should have it in our school systems. I went through the Narcan training. It's very simple, and there's a lot of things that are out there that we should be, as a community, working on. Community Speaks has been a great group for people, and I'm sure many people in their family, I know family members that I have suffered from that. It's a crisis, because what are we doing? And what we need to address it, because we have a responsibility as citizens of the state to help each other out. Two, it's a crisis because we're draining resources. People need treatment. They're not getting treatment. People are losing jobs, money, homes, houses, goes on. It multiplies. It's dragging down everything. And it's a truly clear problem. Now, I'm proud of the fact that some municipalities are stepping up. They have been doing it. But it's a state, municipality, police, community, parent, school partnership. There's a lot of great ideas, and there's a lot of things that are happening. Now we have the opioid, task force here in Connecticut. I have gone to some of those meetings. I think that collectively we know that it's a crisis. I hope that we're beyond saying, well, there was a choice in the matter. Yes, everything starts off as a choice, and when we talk about morality, but that's not going to win the day. We need to help people, treat people, and make them better. So access to treatment beds, access to proper licensing. What we have to watch out for, and I was happy to see that New London is doing this, is getting a registry of the sober houses, because they're truly not, most of them, I don't think, are treatment facilities. And sometimes that becomes the only choice for someone to get treatment, and you're actually putting them in a place where they're more likely not to succeed. It's basically, I look at it as, we'll call this a sober house, but we'll charge you X amount of dollars to live here, and you can go downstairs and attend a meeting. That's not treatment. That's not really doing it. So we need to look at models like in Florida that I had some family members go to that have come back and are doing very well. We need to look at things and making it accessible. We need to look at ways to get insurance and get some type of partnership going in order to pay for services where people can't pay and take care of people. And we saw something in the day today where somebody couldn't come up with $1,500 to stay at the Stonington Institute, came out, overdosed, died.
Mrs. Cheeseman, if you could talk about the opioid crisis and what you would be doing as a legislator to address it.
Well, the National Governors Association published a very interesting series of papers dealing with just that, because it's not just a Connecticut issue. In fact, I think our neighbor Rhode Island has the worst problem in the country in terms of deaths and overdoses. Among the things they discussed were the importance of PDMPs, or prescription drug monitoring programs, whereby you are tracking the doctors, making sure there are no pill mills, making sure you're not finding a disproportionate amount of prescriptions coming from one area. I think there was a piece in the Current last week. There was one facility, 4 of the nurse practitioners were responsible for 80% of a particular opioid prescription in the state. That's the kind of thing we should be looking at. We should be looking at medication-assisted treatment. So you have an addiction. Let's use medication to help you get off that drug, whether it's naloxone, whether it's methadone, whether it's one of a number of drugs. This should be incorporated both in private settings but also in the public settings. If you're incarcerated, we should be able to help you get off your addiction. We should look at, and this is a federal issue, currently, if you are incarcerated, your Medicaid is canceled. You come out, how are you going to get treated? You may be getting treatment in prison or in jail, but you come out and you have no way to pay for it. I think that would require Connecticut to seek a waiver, and we have to look at the way Medicaid pays for inpatient treatment for substance abuse. Medicaid will not pay for inpatient treatment for anyone under 65 in a bed that specializes in treating people with mental disorders that has more than 16, in a facility that has more than 16 beds. That goes back to the founding of Medicaid. That makes it very hard for people who don't have the income, who are relying on the state to get the help they need. And again, that's a federal level issue. But I would certainly look at the recommendations that have been made in terms of getting everyone in the community involved, from the local police, who are very often the ones who are administering the Narcan, finding these very, very sad individuals, male, female, young, old. And then we can't just say, okay, we brought you back. Where do we go from there? That's where working with the community, working with hospitals, emergency rooms, local doctors, social service agencies, we have to have a net that catches people, gives them what they need to recover, whether it's with the assistance of medication, with other counseling, and help them find a better way ahead.
Just a follow-up question from both of you, starting with Ms. Hogan. We talked earlier about the budget crisis that the state has. Is this an issue the state just has to be able to spend money on, has to be willing to spend money on, or are your solutions not necessarily going to cost more state spending? And we'll start with you.
Well, first, when bringing up a good point, when we talk about the Medicaid state plan, that's an amendment. We need to do an amendment to the plan. There's a lot of services that could be covered that aren't covered that have been bandied about with nonprofit providers. We're very grant dependent when we talk about social services. When we talk about people with mental health issues, it's usually X amount of dollar per person that the state pays year after year after year. It's grant payments to third-party contractors, nonprofits to do it. We're moving away from that, and that's going to be kind of unveiled, because what we need to do is expand the use of Medicaid dollars and Medicare, what can be charged for. So case management services to someone in the community, whether it's for drug dependency or whether it's mental health, is not taking state grant money, the 100%. It's starting to slide down to 50%. And what they do in the medical world, third-party billing, is what is happening in the nonprofit world. So what we hope to see is that the money that's being spent year after year for grants for social services will actually go down. And will there have to be some input somehow? Yes. It could be the restoration of some of the budget cuts that were there, or we need to at least maintain the level of funding that we have now in our social services, because the nonprofit provider is very resilient. They have a way of networking. They have the coordinated care access. They have the continuum of care, and everybody works together. What they would need is just support to allow them to continue to that great work that they do, and they will make that easier transition to take care of it. So it could cost some money for the state, but in the long run it's saving tons of money of emergency room visits, of incarcerations, of institutionalized care that we all bear if we were to hit the ground more in the preventative and get it running. So you're making a short-term investment for a very long-term gain.
And Mrs. Cheeseman, if you could comment on the budgetary implications
Sure.
of dealing with this crisis.
I certainly agree that additional money that might be spent would have big savings in the longer run with those reduced emergency room admissions, reduced burden on our local police, first responders. But I would also say, let's look at where we're spending money and save it. We just spent $2 million on the Connecticut Tennis Center in New Haven that offers one competition a year. I love animals, but why the Beardsley Zoo gets $1 million a year just because John Rowland made a deal with Joe Gannon back then? I thought we weren't supposed to support zoos. There is so much money that this state is spending on non-essentials. Let's spend it where it's going to make a difference, like saving our children.
Thank you. Next question begins with Mrs. Cheeseman. What core principles and values make you a Republican?
What core principles and values make me a Republican? Abraham Lincoln, anyone? I believe that we are all blessed with different abilities. And the job of government is to create the circumstances where we can make the most of those abilities. I think it's, what's that old saying? Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for life. My Republican philosophy is to teach as many people as possible to fish, and for those who don't fish, make sure they get fed. I believe in the wonders of the private enterprise system. People denigrate capitalism, but it's done more to raise people out of poverty than any other system in the world. I believe that when I get up every day, I am going to do the best I can and encounter people who are going to do the best I can to make this town, this state, this country a better one. And those are my core Republican beliefs.
And same question to you, Ms. Hogan. What core values and principles make you a Democrat?
My core values as a Democrat is that we work together to get the job done, and we leave no one behind. And we also believe in the private market and capitalism, but we know that sometimes some people are going to fall behind through the cracks, that no matter what, that they're going to remain in the cracks. So sometimes that person might need a hand up to be able to engage in the system of the give and takes and the benefits and rewards. And how is that done? That's done through hard work. Nobody hands it to you on a platter. Nobody ever does. You have to work hard. But it has to mean something. It can't be that you do that all your life and you turn around and there's nothing in your pocket because everybody's taking care of everybody else on the top. As far as I'm concerned, and both parties, I think, suffer from this. It's too much for everything up on the top and never enough for the person who's just working their job. And I come from a long line of Democrats, from people, Irish immigrants, that back in the day, and I guess that Ray thought Roosevelt was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that every kitchen had a picture of Jesus Christ with the heart next to John F. Kennedy. And if a Republican walked in the room, and we're all married to Republicans, what I'm saying is that was the true Democratic Party. It's changed. Special interests on both sides of the parties have corrupted the system. We have special interests calling the shots on the Democratic side, and we have them calling them on the Republican side. And it's a question of greed and access. But for me, I'm still a Democrat at heart, because I believe that if you just keep working and you do an honest day's work, the best result should happen, and you should work with everybody. But I don't believe that when I look at somebody and see someone struggling in the streets, and I'm not saying that my counterpart is saying that, but sometimes they stereotype each group, stereotypes. I'm not going to say somebody, well, that person can do better. What's that person's problem? All they have to do is move away from this area, not looking at the totality of the circumstances of why someone's standing there in their shoes and not having the ability to project themselves in the shoes of people. I hear people suffering that are trying to afford medical expense and prescription drugs. I see people being caregivers to parents and children that have no support and are doing it alone. Those are the democratic principles, and that's who we should be representing.
And Mrs. Cheeseman, haven't heard your opponent's description of the Democrats. What concerns you about the Democratic philosophy that makes you?
I would have thought she was a Republican from hearing that. No, I
don't think so.
I think that both of us want the best for our what would be our constituents. I'm not going to argue with that, and I really have nothing else to say.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, one of our local questions, and it would go to...
So I'm interested in knowing, what do you think then if I didn't address what a Democrat is?
My question for me? I'll leave that to the viewers to decide.
Okay.
And it goes to Mrs. Cheeseman.
Complaints have continued this summer about the crowded conditions, lack of supervision, and trash problems at Gardner Lake State Park in Salem. If the state can't afford to adequately manage this park, should it be closed?
I would hate to see Gardner Lake closed because I think there are many people in Salem who enjoy it. Again, I would like to look at where the state is spending its money. As I say, I think money could have been found to pay for our parks. I love Devil's Hop Yard, the idea that people weren't able to camp there this summer because they closed the campground. It's a question of prioritizing. I think supervision is important, but the state needs to find ways to improve the quality of life for everyone living around.
Ms. Hogan, about the concerns have been raised about the...
Gardner Lake?
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't close it. I find a way to work with the community. I think it's an important asset. I think that's one of the things that shouldn't happen, whether we're reducing lifeguards or whether we're changing hours at the state parks. That's something that the public has been paying for many years, and it's something, a quality of life issue, I think is very important. So I would find a way to work with the locals, the first selectmen, the community, and what ways we can make it better. And it might be a non-government solution, but there's definitely a solution, and everybody wants that.
All right, we're going to move to our closing statements. We've given the candidates a minute each to offer a summary. And according to a coin flip, we're going to begin with Mrs. Cheeseman.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to everyone who may be watching and who can watch in the future. Every day at the Children's Museum, I see families, children, grandparents coming in, and I find myself wondering, how many of you are going to be here in 5, 10, 15 years if we continue to go down this path of increased taxes, greater regulation, no end in sight? But I also find myself thinking it doesn't have to be that way. We can change. Other states have done it. We're smart, we're imaginative. But to do that, we have to change direction, change policies, change people, and change the party in Hartford. My name is Holly Cheeseman. I'm running to represent the people of East Lyme and Salem on November 8th. You'll find me next to Paul Formica on the ballot. And with your help, we can go to Hartford and build a brighter, better future for Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you. Beth Hogan.
Hi. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity to be here today, and to Holly. My name is Beth Hogan, and I believe that I can best represent the citizens of East Lyme and Salem and making the budget system work there in Hartford, to work with everybody in a nonpartisan fashion to implement